to imagine if we had been in this room now, having this debate, if we hadn't had any energy. We are using so many things for energy today. Like, we're using these for taking the times, recording all the rounds. And in team proposition, we believe that if we do not use nuclear energy, we're not going to have this energy that is so important for us in our everyday life. But first, I would like to clarify what nuclear energy is. Nuclear energy is energy abstracted through the process of fusion and fission, which is taking nucleuses apart. And we have defined future as looking at a longer period of time that is longer than 100 years from now. And what we have to ask ourselves in this debate today is nuclear energy a viable energy source for the future? And no, thank you, sir. Can any other energy source replace nuclear energy? So, to answer these questions to you, Team Proposition today are going to be speaking about how fossil fuels are not a viable option and how renewable energy is not efficient enough to supply our energy. And my second speaker, no thank you, is going to be talking about how nuclear energy is the best option for providing energy. So, to start off with my first argument that fossil fuels is not a viable energy option. So, the fossil fuels are going to run out. We do not have a finite supply of fossil fuels. They take millions, no thank you, millions of years to produce, and we are using them at a rate so that, we use them up much faster than what it takes to create them. And this means that we will have an abrupt ending, no thank you, of fossil fuels. And once we are out of fossil fuels, they will be gone. We will have no more, no thank you. We can look at the example of crude oils, which will have run out in 150 years. So we can see that fossil fuels cannot be used for a longer period of time, which the future is, because they're going to run out. And furthermore, no thank you, why we cannot use fossil fuels is because they harm the natural world. So fossil fuels produce carbon dioxide and a lot of other harmful substances such as nitrogen and carbon monoxide. They also cause acid rain and they create holes in the ozone layer, no thank you, and causes greenhouse gases. Now, all of these harmful substances will lead to global warming. So in global warming, it will trap the sunlight and this will lead to a warmer climate. And the warmer climate will provide us with an unstable environment. And with this unstable environment, we're going to harm the world, and therefore we cannot use these fossil fuels as an energy resource. Yes?
Given the fact that for nuclear energy you need plutonium, enriched uranium, tritium, or deuterium, can you deal with the fact that these four are very rare substances that will also run out in some given period of time?
Yes, but see, for nuclear energy, there is a much less amount of this substance needed than what you need. To produce those fossil fuels I've been talking about, you need a huge amount of them, and therefore we do not see running out of substances such as uranium as a problem, because it will, as fossil fuels will run out in nearly the immediate future, if you look at a couple of hundred years. So, moreover, fossil fuels cost a lot and they are unpractical. See, with fossil fuels, there are a large amount of fossil fuels required, which will make them costly. As for every process when we have taken out fossil fuels, they will have to be transported from the mine. And because there are so large amount required, this will cost a lot of money. And moreover, the largest of the fossil fuels also have to be refined in a refinery. And here we can also see that we will need to spend money on the transport and for actually refining them. No, thank you. So that is why fossil fuels are not a viable option for our energy resources, because they are going to run out, which means we cannot use them. And moreover, they also harm the natural world. So therefore, we do not want to use them as an energy resource. No, thank you. As we are destroying our climate. And as I said thirdly, they are costly and inefficient. And that is why, no, thank you. We don't think they are a viable option for an energy resource. So, to move on to my second argument about renewable energy resources. So, I'm going to be talking about hydropower and solar panels and wind turbines. I'm going to start with hydropower. Now, hydropowers are very inefficient as they don't create that much energy. We need, no thank you. In the world today, we're using such a huge amount of energy that they produce too little to be an efficient way of producing energy. And also, with strong currents, they can destroy these dams where the energy is produced. And they will have to rebuild again, which will create huge costs for society. And we can see, no thank you, that less than 1.8% of the energy used today comes from hydropower. We can see that this is insufficient for the future. And we do not see how team opposition can propose how we will bring this up to a higher percentage, no thank you, that can actually make any difference. We get too less energy from this resource for it to be an option. So, solar panels. Solar panels cannot be used anywhere as there is not enough sun anywhere. And why solar panels is not used today is because they're really costly. They cost too much for us to get enough energy for them to be an option we would even consider. So that is why we're not using solar panels today, and why we do not think that they could replace if we had to take away nuclear energy. And for the last renewable energy resource, wind turbines. It's really costly to produce those machines, and they're not in constant use either. If there are not enough winds, we cannot use these wind turbines. And on the other side, if the winds are too strong, these machines will break, and then we will have to pay the cost for rebuilding them. And also, they can only be used for 5 to 10 years, which is why they're not either a viable option. So because of fossil fuels not being able to be used, we cannot use, we have too little renewable energy resources. We think that we have to use nuclear energy. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks. I now call upon the first opposition speaker to make his speech.
What does it mean that there will be no future without nuclear energy? We haven't been given this answer, this question from side opposition. And this is the criteria, the essential part of this debate, and how to evaluate it. And therefore, what we say on side opposition is that today's proposition can win this debate if they prove that nuclear energy must be an essential part of energy production, without which further development and increasing welfare of the whole human race is not possible. This is what the motion is asking for to prove from side opposition. Before going on in our case, let's just see what today's proposition has brought us so far. Their first argument, how fossil fuels are not viable option, has two problems with it. First, they say that there is not enough fossil fuels, but what the sensible position is that right now there is enough coal for like 100 more years. And moreover, 1/3 of oil, whole oil in the earth is hiding behind the Arctic ice, which is now melting, which means that we will have fossil fuels in the future. But second thing I'd like to say is that even so, the opposition is not saying that we will rely on fossil fuels in the future, but opposition says that we will rely on green energy, which renders their first argument totally irrelevant for this debate. Now, the whole problem that this have with these fossil fuels is this will run out. But like Peter has asked in this, whether we have enough resources for nuclear energy. He has told you that we have only like a few kilos of tritium, which is an essential part for nuclear energy. And we haven't been in any efficient response, because what we stand on a position is that nuclear energy is not renewable as well. And looking into a future like 100 or more years, as today proposition is saying, what we believe is that the nuclear energy is faced with the same problem as fossil fuels. The resources will run out. Now, moving on to their second point, how green energy is not efficient. And I see that this will be a big clash in this debate. They say that hydropower plants and solar panels and wind turbines cost more, the yield is not big enough in order to suffice our energy needs. But if you look into the future, the trajectory is that firstly, because of the development, all these technologies are getting much more efficient every year. Estimation is that solar panels are yielding every year 10% more energy than they have had before, and with development this means that this green technology is getting cheaper, which means that there will be political and economic will for the people to rely on green energy. This is what we believe that this green energy argument has been dealt with already. The second thing that they have in this argument is this idea that low reliance on green energy right now means that there will be no more reliance on green energy in the future, because they say that only 10% of the energy right now is being used for green energy. Firstly, thank you, Madam. We do not see how this means that there will be no more development of green energy in the future. Moreover, right now only 2% of energy is being developed from nuclear power plants. Therefore, following the same logic, nuclear power plants will not be able to be developed in the future as well. Therefore, there will be a future without nuclear energy. So now, when I've dealt with these two arguments, I would like to move on our constructive case. On our opposition side, we are saying firstly that human race will not suffer because there are alternative ways of energy production. And secondly, what we're saying is that technical and political difficulties won't allow development of nuclear energy to such magnitude where the whole human race would depend on it. And if we prove either of these, we believe that the motion should fall. In our argumentation line, firstly, I'll be talking to you obviously about alternative ways of energy productions. Secondly, I will be talking to you about technical difficulties, how they will prevent us from developing nuclear power plants to a huge degree, meaning that we will have to look for other energy sources. And thirdly, my colleague will tell you how expansion of nuclear energy leads to political tensions, which will prevent development of nuclear energy power plants in the future. Going on to alternative ways of energy production. What we have to know is that the billions and billions of dollars of every single currency are being spent on green energy development. And as I've told you before, every year the energetic yield of solar panels, windmills, geothermal power plants, and biofuels is getting higher and higher, and it's rising and rising just a second. And of course it is getting cheaper. And this is what we believe is the main trajectory if waiting at a point that in the future human race will depend on green energy. Why do you disagree?
How do you explain the great fall of the green energy market in America, if it is so efficient?
Because of the, what's the term, sorry, I forgot. Because of the people who go to the politicians that are sent from the fossil fuel firms and they go into politics and they actually prevent this. But the fact is that, sorry for losing the term, but the fact is that in the future when the fossil fuels will run out, these people will be getting out of jobs. The oil industry will be getting much lower, much less important in the industry, and therefore it will be focusing on green technology. Nice example is the firm Exxon. Firm Exxon is an oil industry company that is producing a lot of crude oil, that is producing a lot of oil and getting a lot of money from selling oil. But what Exxon is already doing right now is it is investing in green technology development, a lot of money. They're giving to people, to scientists in order to develop green technology. Why? Because Exxon is smart, because Exxon knows that in the future there will be green technology on which we'll rely. And this is one of the points that proves that there is an economic and political will for developing green technology. But what we have to ask ourselves now is whether green technology is really a viable option, whether we already have some examples of countries that depend on green technology. Iceland. 99% of the energy that Iceland gets is purely from green energy. It is from geothermal energy. And we have a lot of other countries like Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and a lot of other European states that are already relying like almost purely on green technology. Why?
But sir,
Thank you. Firstly, because they have the money to afford it, and secondly, because they're in political will. But With further development of green technology will be getting cheaper and cheaper, and green technology will be getting much more efficient. Therefore, there will be political and economic will to actually use green energy. Therefore, we do not need nuclear energy to sustain our energy needs. Before going on, yes, Mike?
You're saying that these economical principles will assure that they will get cheaper and more efficient, but can you actually prove that they will?
There is a trajectory. There has been analysis done, like in major newspapers, like The Economist, like the Foreign Affairs. A lot of people, like a lot of economists, are saying that this is going to get cheaper. But in terms of proving anything, without doubt, this is not possible because you cannot go into the future and actually bring some real evidence here. It is what today's debate is about what the trajectory is pointing at, and trajectory is pointing at developing green technology. Now, technical difficulties, we say. Technical difficulties will prevent us from developing nuclear power plants to a huge degree. In order for human race to rely on nuclear energy, a precondition must be met. This means that nuclear energy will be able to be developed. This means that a lot of nuclear power plants must be developed. But what is the position is that there are a lot of technical difficulties that prevent nuclear energy power plants to being developed. Like location, you cannot build nuclear power plants in any place because you have the possibility of earthquake. Secondly, you need educated people, a lot of educated people, a lot of highly educated people that are not so common all over the world. Thirdly, you need infrastructure. You need a lot of roads, you need a lot of infrastructure, you need a lot of building companies, and this is not so common throughout all the world. Fourthly, you also have to know where you're going to put this nuclear waste. If you do not have devised this issue, if you haven't devised a system how you will get rid of it, you will not be able to develop nuclear power plants. So ladies and gentlemen, there is a trajectory pointing at green technology getting cheaper and cheaper, and there must be more people to use it. And secondly, even if today's proposition is saying that there is a political and economic will for nuclear energy, we have technical difficulties that will prevent human race from relying on nuclear energy. Therefore, without nuclear energy, there is future. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call upon the second proposition to deliver her remarks. Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, a huge phenomenon and breakthrough was discovered by nuclear scientists at Alsace-Lorraine in France. This discovery was the fact that thorium, which we knew existed, was now in fact abundant. Our future was set. We already had uranium for nuclear energy, but now we also had thorium, ladies and gentlemen. Team opposition has said there is not enough elements for nuclear power to thrive and be successful. But here we now have thorium, which is abundant. Now we only needed the industry of nuclear power to grow. So ladies and gentlemen, today I will be discussing my main point, which is that nuclear energy is the best option, and I will prove to you how the future will be without nuclear energy, and this is not a positive future. And now, I will be talking to you why nuclear energy is the best option because of the cost, because of the reliability, and the practicality. But before that, let's go into some rebuttal. Now, team opposition says that renewable energy will be able to support the world because the yield is getting higher. But ladies and gentlemen, team proposition clearly showed you that nuclear energy right now only accounts for 2.3% of the world's energy in total. It may maybe account for 99% of Iceland's energy, but if you look in total, that 99% of one country is not even close to accounting for the whole world. It's only 2.3%, no, thank you, sir. 2.3% of the energy in the whole world. And how in the world are we supposed to bring up that 2.3% up to 100%? No, thank you, sir. Is this a good investment? Is this a reliable investment? Is this a practical investment? The answer, thank you, sir. The answer, ladies and gentlemen, is no, and I will prove to you further on into my arguments. So let's go on to the next. Yes, sir.
How do you then deal with the fact that nuclear energy accounts only for 2% of the world's energy? Following your logic, you have exactly the same problem as we have.
Sir, I will prove to you. In fact, I have statistics from the IEA, International Energy Agency, accounting that nuclear energy right now accounts for 2/5 of the world's energy resources, not 2%, and I will go further into that in the arguments of costs and reliability and practicality. Now, Team Opposition also proposed that nuclear power plants cannot be planted anywhere or everywhere. But what about renewable energy resources? Can we have solar panels everywhere? No. Can we have all of these dams everywhere? No, thank you, sir. No. But nuclear power plants, we don't need them at every single place in the world for able for them to be efficient or practical. We just need them in certain places. As I will go into how transportation of nuclear energy is efficient. No, thank you, sir. And the fact about nuclear waste, that it can be dangerous. Well, because the nuclear industry is growing now, as I'll explain to you again furthermore in arguments, underground waste stores are being built and being invested in, which then in the future we have a hope, the scientists have a hope that the waste can be used. Now, moving into my arguments about the cost. No, thank you, sir. About the cost. Basically, right now, as I said, nuclear energy, it provides for 2/5 of the world's no, thank you, sir. Energy, and that is because it's cheap. Because there is no, thank you, sir. It's cheap because very little amount of uranium or thorium has to be used in order to get the same yield. No, thank you, as we have to do for for like tons of coal or for building all these machines, as my first speaker pointed out, by making renewable energy sources so costly. No, thank you, sir. And because of its efficiency, as I right now explained to you, because 1 gram of uranium or thorium has to be used in order to get as much energy as from, let's say, tons of coal or all of these machines, like wind, no thank you, sir, solar panels, wind turbines to produce the energy. Also, there are not so many steps or stages for nuclear energy. Furthermore, makes it less costly. For example, oil refinery, oil, you have to refine it, you have to go through all these processes. But not, no thank you, sir, but not with the nuclear energy. Also, let's go on to the next point of reliability. So, as I said previously, now we know that we have an excess of elements in order to support us in the future. This is a reliable investment. We have uranium to start with for nuclear energy, but now we also have thorium. No, thank you, sir. We also have thorium, and as we have said, we need just a small amount of these elements, which means we have at least 500 years in the future to be able to use these. No, thank you, sir. Able to use these elements, and counting on the fact that right now this industry is growing, as we can see, China, India, Sweden, France, all of these countries are investing in nuclear energy. They're building nuclear energy power plants. No, thank you, sir. Why would they do this if they wouldn't think there's a future in this? No, thank you, sir. Yes, they're investing because they think there is a future in this, and therefore we can see how with nuclear power plants we will be able to provide energy, whereas renewable resources will be able to account for the amount of energy we need in the future, because this amount is so huge, and that's why countries, as the Team Proposition pointed out, as USA is not investing in renewable energy resources because it's not getting able. No, thank you, sir. And then Team Opposition in this case pointed out that, well, the US is not using renewable energy sources or investing because of political tensions. Well, we don't believe that that fact is true, because if there's political tension in the US, then there could be political tensions in all the other countries, which will stop us from using renewable sources in the future. Basically, they're saying that there is a chance that renewable energy won't be used because small factors such as political interventions. Yes, so coming back to now let's move on to the practicality. As I pointed out before, and I'm pointing it out again to make it clear, 2/5 of the world's energy. No, yes, sir.
This is a lie. Claiming that 40% of energy is devised from nuclear energy is not true, because nuclear energy is very expensive.
Very expensive. No, sir, this is not a lie, because, well, I think a week ago I read an article in the New Scientist by loads of researches and by statistical impacts from the International Energy Agency, which is in charge of this project of the energy of the future, stating that 2/5 of the world's energy currently is provided by nuclear energy. And because all these industries, as I'm telling you, India, China, France, Sweden are investing in it, it's being predicted to be doubled by 2058. Double, ladies and gentlemen. We can see that this is going to be the future. And that's why it's so practical, because it's in use, it's really efficient, and it will become even more efficient. And because only small amounts have to be used, it will be easy transportation. So we don't need, it's practical, because we won't need these nuclear power plants everywhere. No, because we can have them in certain places where they can have the maximum yield, and we can transport them. And they also said that we need all of these great scientists and smart people. Well, great. This will create more jobs, more innovation, more people to go into science and help us with our energy in the future. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that nuclear energy is the only way for our future to provide energy that will cover the cost. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call upon the second opposition speaker.
Dear Mr. Speaker, what today's side of proposition is trying to pursue is that nuclear energy is some sort of divine energy coming from heaven. Like the clouds went apart, and this nuclear energy, this perfect sort of energy for human being, is coming down to earth for free for everybody. But this, dear Mr. Speaker, is not true. I'm going to do 2 points of rebuttal. The first one is going to be the cost, how the energy is going to run out, and on the second point, I'm going to argue why nuclear energy is not possible for every country and why green energy is still a better option. So moving on to the first point, what we heard in the second speech of today's side of the position is that 2/5 of the world currently are using nuclear energy. Doing the math, this means 40%, but then doing logical math, we assume that 5% of countries now in the world even have the money to afford to use nuclear energy, meaning that 5% of countries in this world right now is definitely not possible to be using 40% of nuclear energy. On the second point, the second speaker talked about thorium, how now we see that thorium and such elements are in abundance and the nuclear energy is going to last for 500 years. But what we are saying is, yeah, but this is relatively to this current use of nuclear energy, meaning that if we increase the use of nuclear energy, this percentage, or meaning this number of years, is going to be severely reduced. Down to the bottom line, we come to the point, no thank you, come to the bottom line that the usage of fossil fuels is exactly the same to the nuclear fuels when we are doing this comparison on years. On the second point, what have we heard is, yeah, fossil fuels are causing large global warming problems right now. Our first speaker pointed out clearly that we are not arguing and advocating fossil fuels on side of opposition today, and we have rejected their whole first argument, so we kindly beg today's side of opposition to stop, no thank you, to stop giving examples about fossil fuels. But on this point, we have examples of Chernobyl, we have examples of Fukushima. Global warming is nothing compared to the pollution of nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is one of the biggest reasons for dispute between the countries. Such countries as Germany and France in Europe, and Slovenia and Croatia, you perhaps heard of them, have major disputes because these countries cannot decide where are they going to put nuclear waste. Because if you're putting them on a border between the countries, these wastes are polluting such France and Germany as well as Slovenia and Croatia. So global warming on side of, no thank you, compared to nuclear waste, our point still, side still wins at this point. But moving on to the second one, this is why nuclear energy cannot be produced everywhere. What we have heard from today's side of opposition in their first speech is, well, basically we cannot build solar panels in every country. What we say on this point is, yeah, sure, we agree. You can put solar panels in the countries that have a lot of sun in the days of the year. We can put like windmills in the countries that have a lot of wind on average. We can put different alternatives for the green energy in countries that have no thank you situations and chances to use such examples of green technology. On this point, again, repeating the points of my first speaker are, nuclear energy. You need to have the location. Again, example of Fukushima. Everybody was sure that Fukushima is a great example, a great place to put a nuclear power plant with them. But Japan is known for their earthquakes. And what happened? Kabam! And everything went wrong. On the second point, do you need the infrastructure? On the third point, again, you need to take care of nuclear waste, and this is presenting one of the biggest problems. And on the third point, we are talking about lobbies, and explain them again. No, thank you. Nowadays we have like oil lobbies to deal with, present like the opposition for the green technology. But what we are saying is that if we support, like severely support development of nuclear energy, these lobbies are going to arise, oil lobbies are going to fall, and these nuclear lobbies are again going to present the threat for the green technology to develop. On this point, lobbies fall on our side. But moving on to my constructive, this is going to be political tensions between the countries and within the countries.
Sir.
Yeah, before that, please, madam.
Yeah. Development of green resource energy is great, but it won't supply the whole world as nuclear energy can.
Yeah, exactly. Again, nuclear energy won't be able to supply energy to the whole world. Imagine putting it to Nepal, imagine putting it to the mountain state of China, imagine putting it on Japan and such countries, to Norway, Sweden, and so on and so on. You simply cannot do it. No, thank you, madam. Moving on to my constructive. What we are seeing in the world today is that nuclear energy by its nature is still presenting a threat between the countries. Why? Because it's highly dangerous, because it can cause different problems, and on the third point, and which is the most importantly, is that nuclear energy can be used in bad manners. Why is this so? Because political entities, between the countries there are great political tensions, because countries simply don't trust each other. Because one country that is not trusting another can know or cannot know that this country is going to use this nuclear energy or nuclear power plants in a good manner or a bad manner. And countries are afraid of each other. What we see on the point of proposition today, if we are going to accept this resolution, we see that nuclear energy should be used in a high magnitude, meaning that a lot of nuclear energy needed to be produced, a lot of nuclear power plants needed to be produced. We have examples between Israel and Iran. And this is still a dispute in international sphere nowadays, because they cannot decide if there was a good argument or not, because Israel bombed the nuclear power plants in Iran just because they weren't sure if they were using it for power planting or doing bombs. And this is the reason when we are saying that on a magnitude that would be sufficient for the whole world to supply it with the energy, we come to the disputes that simply prevent it to go to the future with nuclear power plants. What we see here is that countries are going to develop some sort of skepticism. So, if you're going to use such power plants on a high level, on an international level, if you wanted to supply every country with nuclear energy, you would need to have like international agreement. But because of the reasons that we see in the world nowadays, because countries are skeptic right now when nuclear energy in countries with tensions inside them are still not trusting each other, we see that countries would cause great political tensions. They would maybe even sabotage the production of power plants in such countries. Why is that so? Because they know they present a threat. Because the United States of America, or I don't know, Germany and France, wouldn't be happy if, I don't know, Iran or Syria would suddenly start popping out many different nuclear power plants. Why is that so? Because there is already political tensions and warfare in the Middle East. Just imagine those countries popping up nuclear power plants and try asking yourself, who is going to trust them? Next, further countries are not going to trust their neighbors, first of all, in the matter how are they going to use nuclear power plants, and again on the second one, who is going to deal with such power plants, such nuclear waste, and who is going to do infrastructure and be the brain of this operation. But on the point of what is going to happen within the countries, we see that if you want to build a nuclear power plant, you need to place it in a city. You need to place it next to the people in the vicinity of villages and cities. And what we see in the world today is that there are great civil backlashes. For example, what happened in France, they needed to shut down 10 nuclear power plants because in the east of France, people just didn't want to accept the risk. They didn't want to accept the option that something is going to go severely bad and they are going to be the victims of it. Because of these reasons, because we see that political tensions can happen on a global level and political tensions can happen within the countries. Because our examples are still better alternatives, and because nuclear energy has no future, please go with opposition.
Thank you. I now call upon the third proposition speaker.
Let me start with my speech with a little story. A story about the green energy business in America, the green energy bubble. A few years ago, we have started to realize that we are indeed going to run out of fossil fuels. People in America realized, energy industries realized this, and they started to invest in green energy. However, now we can see the results of this. Minimal results. They have indeed started to put huge amounts of money, billions, into this industry, and what do we see? Only 2.3% of the world is actually using this green energy at the moment, and the complete market has fallen. There is no more real green energy market in the US right now that is viable due to its huge economical plummet. We have to take this into consideration when we talk about this debate, because let's talk about what team opposition is proposing here. First of all, I would like to talk about the case of fossil fuels, and why this goes into team opposition and not to team opposition, as they so say. Fossil fuels now are used today greatly. They are the greatest energy source we have today, and they will be continued to be used. And however, we are planning to let them decline. We're not saying we're going to. Team opposition, however, is saying that we should stop using fossil fuels altogether. And we can indeed go together with this, and we stop using fossil fuels. We can agree with this. However, then let's look at the consequences. Saying, no, thank you, sir. If we indeed are going to stop fossil fuels altogether, we're going to have to raise the green energy level to an ultimate 100%. If we are indeed actually not going to use any nuclear energy. No, thank you, sir. However, team proposition never said anything against. We never said that we should stop using green energy. We never said that we should have 100% nuclear energy. We have to take this into consideration again. Sir. No, thank you, sir. We are saying that there is no future without it, because it's the only viable energy source that can be made greater and can grow into an actual energy source that are viable for the world. Today, this plummets the idea that, yes, we cannot build these nuclear energy plants in Iran because they're going to be bombed. However, they do have a desert and they do have the oil still there to be used. We're talking about the greatest part of the world where we can actually put most thank you, sir. In inland Africa and in Sweden, as they mentioned, we do have nuclear power plants. We can put nuclear power plants on most places in the world, and these can be used today. So now, where are the clashes in the debate? This is that, first of all, green energy is viable. This is the main argument that team opposition has brought forward, that it is indeed a viable energy source. Well, let's get to this. When we get to it, when we really talk about this argument that team opposition has placed it, is that we have hope for the future about green energy. They have said one fact about how 10% of the solar panels are actually getting battery charged. That is really the only example they have shown us how exactly the green energy market is going to explode and is going to provide us with this 100% of energy that they so want us. This is, of course, not enough to show us. We show you that there's a huge decrease in the actual market. How are we going to supply the energy with the world with green energy, sir? No, thank you, sir. Over the next 100 years, this hope is just not enough for this argument to stand that green energy is actually viable. They tell us that Iceland is largely based on green energy. Iceland, with a population so minimal that it should not even, it could basically be ignored. And their type of energy sources, no thank you, that is being used is not even widely used around the world. It cannot be used. This thermal energy that is in the ground is just not viable for most of the world today, and we are ignored. Sir, therefore it does not stand. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Putting aside the lie that 40% of the world uses nuclear energy, can you give us one example of a country that uses nuclear energy as the main source of energy in it?
I can name you two. First of all, France does have the largest, and second of all, Sweden, where we live in today. 2/3 of the energy business is indeed provided by nuclear energy. Sweden is one of the most nuclear countries in the world. We can provide a largely with nuclear energy, and largely invested in it. They're a short country. Okay. Now I would like to go back to what we have against nuclear green energy as you so provided for us, is that it cannot be transported. If we put indeed these solar panels into Iraq, in these deserts, how are we going? No, thank you. How are we going to get this energy to the US. This is impossible, or too icy for any country that does not have the sun provided. This is not logical without any good batteries, without any superconductors. We do not have the energy. No, thank you. We do not have development. We don't have any way of actually making this happen. And this is where we get to in green energy, and where this debate leaves us off. We do not have any leads on why this energy business can boom into 100%. No, thank you, sir. Now, I'd like to talk about the second class, and that is about nuclear energy.
Before that,
sir. No, thank you, sir. Nuclear energy, is it so bad? Well, we of course say no. And what do we have provided for you? We have provided you a model on how, an analysis of how this can actually grow. And we've provided you with an element or a fuel that can actually support the nuclear industry very well. Thorium. Let me tell you a story about thorium. Thorium is a byproduct of all fossil fuel taken out of the ground. You will produce thorium. It is mostly thrown away as waste today. However, then we found out it can actually be used as a nuclear energy. It is one of the most abundant fuels on the earth, and we will not run out of it. It is just almost impossible. It is more likely that we will die before we run out of thorium. It is just one of the best sources we have today. We have to look at thorium if we're going to look at nuclear energy, because it is the future of nuclear energy. And it is widely said to be the future of nuclear energy, because it is just so abundant. Okay, go ahead.
Can you look me in the eyes and give me one source that says thorium is so abundant it will last for 500 years as you are claiming?
Well, we have, of course, looked at the article in the Octofinals that my friend has read, of course, about nuclear energy, in which indeed it said that thorium is the main energy. We're going to be energy source. We're going to be used, and it just is common knowledge in the nuclear energy realm that in the business that thorium is going to be the future of nuclear energy. It is a nuclear source. How can we possibly ignore this? It is all. So we get to this point where we show you an analysis of how we can actually grow the nuclear industry. We're using this story, and by showing you that nuclear plants can be built almost everywhere in the world. How we can actually bring this energy to the people. It is a growing market instead of the green energy market, which is only plummeting. Nuclear energy is one of the most researched markets today, and development is wildly possible. This is just not debated by team opposition. And by showing that this growth is possible, team proposition has shown you a debate which largely goes to our side. By showing a market that can grow, that is possible to supply the earth with clean energy. Clean and viable energy. This debate goes to team proposition. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call upon the third opposition speaker to deliver his remarks.
So, judges, in my speech, I will try my best to acknowledge that even if all the facts that side proposition is claiming, even though we believe that they are factually incorrect, even if they are right, I'll be assuming that side opposition still takes this debate, and I'll be showing you why. I'll be arguing on three main points in this debate. Firstly, I'll be talking about accessibility of energy to the whole world, as the burden of the side proposition is to show that it will be the future energy of the world, not Sweden. Secondly, I'll be arguing about environmental and economical viability of such options. And thirdly, I'll be very briefly refreshing arguments about political clashes and limitations which have not been touched by the side proposition and that we have brought. But first about accessibility. Here we have our first problem, because we believe that startup of nuclear energy is very, very hard. This is the thing that side proposition hasn't done. First, you need much money. They have to show us how, I don't know, developing countries will suddenly shift to nuclear energy when they do not even have an infrastructure. No, thank you. They don't have political means, geographical means, safety means, or infrastructural and monetary means to provide themselves with such nuclear energy. They haven't shown us that. Because what we believe is that we'll have a fairly new concept in the world if we actually shift to nuclear energy, which is firstly, either developing countries will have to produce this energy for themselves, which is practically impossible because they do not have the means to, or secondly, for the first time in history, developing countries will have to buy energy from the developed countries, which we believe is detrimental to the developing countries and will not be possible for them to flourish. Therefore, we believe that even if there is like a semantical future for those countries not taking nuclear energy, this is not the real future that should be debated in this debate. But furthermore, what we believe is that it is better to make those countries dependent upon themselves, which is by providing them technology, which is on our side green technology, because we believe that the difference is that once you have green technology, you produce your own technology, and it's much easier to install a solar panel than build a whole new industry of nuclear energy, because you need people, you need geographical means which possibly you do not have, and so on and so on. And we believe it's better to make those countries dependent on themselves by the means of green energy that they choose, and it is appropriate for them, which was my second speaker was explaining and wasn't taught by the side proposition. We aren't saying that we should put solar panels on Iceland, because obviously that is not viable. But let's put geothermal energy on Iceland, and let's put solar panels in sub-Saharan Africa, and put hydropower plants in China, because those are viable options for that very country. We're not saying that all the countries should have all the green energy. Furthermore, what we believe is that they themselves have acknowledged the burden that the greatest part of the world will have to have nuclear energy. But then the third speaker comes up and says, well, trajectory says that the greatest part of the world will have green energy because Sweden and France have it. But ladies and gentlemen, 70 or 80% of the world are developing countries. We do not believe that this debate is debated upon, countries such as Sweden and France, and I will also deal with this later, but they have to show us that they will provide a sustainable source of energy for the majority of countries, not their own country. And furthermore, on the point of accessibility, we have given you lobbies. There's again a point that went unresponded by the side proposition. We have shown you that lobbies are the one keeping artificially high prices of green energy, and with elimination of lobbies, which will happen sooner or later because oil industry is running out, we will get cheaper green energy products. Point unresponded by the side proposition. But furthermore, on the point of lobbies, we believe that lobbies actually show us that there is mutual exclusivity between sources of energy, because one lobby will more or less be predominant, which is already happening now, that we are mainly dependent on only industry because it has a strongest lobby. So what we believe is that actually if we support nuclear energy, we are kind of excluding all other sources of energy because their lobby will become the dominant, as it is now the case with oil industry. Therefore, we believe that it will be even harmful to the development of other sources of energy. But lastly, the point of accessibility, they give us this argument of transportation, which we believe on the side opposition is complete nonsense and is totally underanalyzed. But even if it were analyzed, we say they give us the reason you cannot transport green energy. But how do you transport nuclear energy? I mean, energy gets transported it's the same energy. It's not like a physical thing. It's energy by definition. It doesn't have matter. I mean, you transporting a certain kind of thing. But even if you're talking about infrastructure, we believe it's easier to transport a solar panel than a nuclear power plant. Therefore, we believe that even in the point of transportation, side opposition takes this debate. But second major analysis of my speech will be dealt with the environmental economical viability. First point we have to acknowledge here is that green technology will only get cheaper with time, because it's a renewable source. And this is a main difference between renewable and unrenewable sources, because as the unrenewable sources are running out, they're getting more expensive because of the scarcity on the market. And this is the problem we have with a long run dependence on nuclear energy. Yes, perhaps we have some magical metal like thorium, but we believe that even thorium will run out. There is more sun in the sky than all the elements in periodic table. Therefore, we believe that even no matter how many examples they give you, and no matter how scientifically accurate they are, we still, by common sense, know that renewable sources are renewable. Therefore, their price will only go down with the development in technology, whereas unrenewable sources will get more and more expensive because the resources are running out at some specific rate, but are running out. Furthermore, in a second matter, we also believe that lobbies are the one making the green industry expensive. The point which I have already mentioned has been not dealt with. Yes, ma'am.
You're talking about the distant future. Do you really think that in the instant future renewable energy?
Thank you. Instant future, as defined by the side proposition, was at least 100 years, if I remember correctly. Therefore, they have to decide whether they will change the definition in a pre-white speech, or they are prepared to debate under their own definition from the first speech. Furthermore, what we have problems with, and okay, this transport thinking, that they say, well, we'll use energy for transportation of renewable energy. We'll see how we do not use transportation for nuclear power plants. Like once we install solar panels, that's it. But with nuclear energy, we have to transport waste at a constant rate. You have to import reactants for the nuclear energy. We read that we actually get much more transport on this point of environmental harmfulness, because you will have to have constant transport into and out of the power plant, whereas with green energy you do not have that. And furthermore, no thank you, the point of waste that we have given you, we have said like there's nuclear waste that is harmful. And what's that proposition says? Well, there is hope that scientists will find an underground place where they will make use of the nuclear waste. Seriously, their plan is to have a hope that something will happen. Already Somalia and sub-Saharan countries are being like a I don't know what's a politically correct word, but like we're exporting a lot of waste there and people are being endangered. We cannot rely on the hope that scientists will make a miracle. We believe it's detrimental to those people, and we should not live in a scenario where those people's lives are in danger. Like lastly, I want to talk about political clashes very briefly because they didn't respond. First, we have told you that it's impossible to have this nuclear energy because of political clashes between political entities. They have not responded to that. We're giving you examples of Slovenia, Croatia, for example, France, Germany, and Israel, and Iran. They have not responded to that. We believe these are fair examples, and we have given you a fair analysis of why this would happen. And furthermore, like when consequences arise, such as in Fukushima, such as in Chernobyl, we believe that consequences are so detrimental to political entities and to the people throughout generations that we cannot talk about future, and we cannot talk about like the viable options of energy. And when they are actually talking about what trajectories and what market is showing, I'll be asking just one question, you judges. When was the last time you saw a car run on biofuels, and when was the last time you saw a car run on plutonium? Thank you.
Thank you. I now call upon the opposition reply speaker to deliver his remarks.
Whilst my colleague assumes that their advice or proposition are correct, and based on that, my role as a reply speaker is to say that the world does not rely 40% on nuclear energy. So the question today is how to evaluate this debate. What is the status quo and where is the trajectory pointing at? And if the trajectory is pointing at away from nuclear energy, is there future for us? And in 2 points, I will analyze how there is future for us when the trajectory is pointing away from nuclear energy. Firstly, the problems of nuclear energy, and secondly, whether green technology can suffice or needs for nuclear energy, for energy as such. We have told you like 7 reasons that are really problematic with nuclear energy that have been insufficiently tackled by side opposition. The first one is political tensions between Germany, France, and the Middle East, which shows us that there will be no development of nuclear energy in the future. Second point, civil backlash. People in the south of France have had a protest when southern France wanted to build nuclear energy in the south. It was the last protest when somebody wanted to build solar panel or windmill. Third problem, cost of nuclear energy. It takes years to build, it is very expensive, therefore it cannot be spread in the developing world. Fourth problem, infrastructure. You have to have a lot of infrastructure in order to build the nuclear energy, much more than if you want to build, let's say, geothermal or hydropower plant. 5th point, knowledge. You have to know much more about nuclear physics. You have to have a lot of universities and research centers in order to be able to build a nuclear power plant, much more than you need if you want to build a solar panel. You can actually just buy them in the market. 6 points, non-renewable. Nuclear energy is non-renewable, and in some point, these materials will run out. It's the same problem that we have with fossil fuels. And I cannot say that I believe them, that there will be like enough plutonium and all this stuff for thousands of years. But when we have a comparison that between green technology and nuclear energy, which one is renewable or not, obviously we're going to go for the green one. And then the last problem, nuclear waste. This is a significant problem of nuclear energy. Again, once that leads to a point where we have to acknowledge that there is trajectory not pointing at the development of nuclear energy, but it's pointing other way. Which way is the trajectory pointing? The trajectory is pointing at green technology. And can we survive with it? The first point is research and development. It is a fact that in the future, a lot cheaper and a lot better green technology will be developed. This is a fact. It is going on right now. Exxon, oil firm, is already investing in green technology, which shows us that there is economic interest in green technology. The fact that investment in the green technology in the US market, like a few months ago or somewhere, dropped a little bit. First of all, I believe that we can blame the prices. Second of all, I believe that we can blame the lobbies. And the question is now, there are lobbies for oil market, but once the lobbies go away, in which way the market will go, in which way we focus. We believe it will focus on green technology. And the last point that we have to know is that there are many different options that can be tailored to every country's needs when we ask ourselves whether green technology will be spread all over the world. You can have solar panels if you have a lot of desert. You can have wind turbines if you have large windy fields. You can have geothermal energy if you have bored soil. You can have hydropower plants if you have a lot of rivers. You can have biofuels if you have a lot of fields. You can have water snakes if you have a lot of sea, etc. And this is the main difference between green technology and nuclear energy. You cannot simply put a nuclear power plant everywhere, but you can find one specific way of how to supply your energy needs to green technology. So ladies and gentlemen, trajectory is pointing at green technology and there is future in it. Therefore, the motion falls. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call upon the final speaker of this debate, the proposition reply speaker, to deliver her remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, we can see that the main question today in this debate is, what is more viable for the future, green energy or nuclear energy? Today, Team Proposition's job has been to convince you that the future of the world is not going to survive without nuclear energy. And we believe that we have proved this because what we have seen today, the Team Opposition has told us that green energy is viable because we can have solar panels in some places, we can have hydropower, hydro dams in some places, and we can have wind turbines in some places. And they have said that this is cheap because developing countries can afford it. Whereas we on Team Proposition side have clearly showed to you that the developing countries are not investing in these green and renewable countries because it is not cheap, as we have shown you with the cost. Wind turbines, they're so inefficient. We have to replace them every 5 to 10 years. They're costly. They break down if the winds are slightly stronger. Dams, if the current is too strong, we have to rebuild them again. More cost. Solar panels, the material to build solar panels are costly as well. So we have shown you that instead of putting so much cost into renewable energy, which only provides 2.3% of the world's energy, these developing countries, such as China, such as India, are investing in nuclear energy instead. Why? Because it's cheaper for them. Firstly, as we have told you, because it's more efficient, because it's only 1 gram, ladies and gentlemen, 1 gram of thorium or uranium instead of all these wind turbines, these machines, and all of the equipment needed to build this whole industry of renewable energy. Moreover, we have also proven to you that the examples that Team Opposition are using of Iceland is a really small example and doesn't contribute much to the whole because Iceland's population is so small and renewable energies won't be able to bring up the energy for the world in the long run because we are looking at the future, both the instant future and the distant future. And how they have not proven to us in this debate at all how they are planning to bring up the 2.3% of energy provided by renewable energy to the 100%. They have not been able to prove to us how renewable energy alone will account for all the needs of the population without nuclear energy, whereas we have proven to you that nuclear energy alone can stand and provide of the needs of the people without renewable energy Because we have shown you that today in the world, already 2/5 of the whole, not a single country as Iceland, where 99% of the energy is provided by renewable energy, but the whole world, 2/5 are provided by nuclear energy. And this we can see is gonna improve, the industry is gonna improve, and it's gonna be double in the next 50 years. So we can see how this is a viable, a practical, and a reliable source for the future. Moreover, as we said that these developing countries are investing in nuclear energy, and Team Opposition completely failed to show us or prove why China and India are investing if nuclear energy is so bad. They just made a statement that no, they're not investing. They just said they're not investing because they don't have the money, but they never showed us where we gave you that they are investing. They never gave any proof or logical explanations as to why it's bad, and therefore, with that argument, I believe that Team Proposition has a stronger case. So vote for nuclear energy. Thank you.